Welcome back to the Small Triumph Sports Library and Archives channel. By my count, it has been almost 2 years since I have provided a proper big picture update on my 1969 Triumph GT6 Plus project. In the interim, in various videos, I have talked about some of the work that I've done, um, some of the things I've been working on, some of the detail work I've accomplished. I've even teased some things through images, but it really has been quite some time since I've provided a big picture update. Not that I'm under the illusion that there are scores of viewers out there anxious to learn exactly what I've accomplished to date, but I have been promising an update for quite some time, and I should deliver. I decided to break this update into two parts. Originally, I was going to do just one video, but as I begin to pull things together, I got a strong sense that it might get out of hand, especially the way that I do things, which is narrative over still images with the occasional video mixed in to illustrate something. As I established in the very first video on the channel, I do not and have never planned to film myself working on my car as a matter of course. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is there are people on YouTube who are already doing a very good job of that. So, you know, to some extent, that is covered. The other thing is, I am already pretty slow about getting work done. A lot of what I'm doing on the car is new to me. I spend a lot of time researching every task, every job that I take on. I'm reading, I'm watching YouTube videos, and then I will often start very cautiously or do a little bit of test work till I build up my confidence. To me, I'm already painfully slow, and if I tried to film everything that I did, I think that would slow me down considerably. And I do hope to reach the finish line at some point sooner than later. So I don't film myself doing work. I provide these updates more as narrative, again with illustrations. And 40 or 50 minutes of that might be a bit much. So I decided to break this into two distinct videos. So this will be part one, and part two will come along a little bit later. That not only keeps the videos at a more manageable length, but it also allows me to push out content a little bit faster. This will be part one and an update of where things stand to date. Part one will involve a brief segment talking about the progress that I've made on the engine or certain parts of the engine, and then also about the work that I did reskinning the left-hand door. Part two will cover some other things and really provide a better sense of the overall big picture. If you want to see what I've been able to accomplish so far, I'm going to try to offer some information that might be of use to hobbyists out there along the way. Maybe some of you can learn from some of my good decisions or mistakes or whatever the case may be. But if the work I've been doing is of any interest to you, stick around. So, in addition to me hoping that over the course of these updates, or really in any video I do, that I am providing something of value to you out there, some information or what have you, I also do this in order to learn. especially because with some of the actual car work that I do, I don't have a lot of experience. So if you have any advice or constructive criticism or what have you, please by all means comment. And that established, let's get into it. Back in February 2025, I finally got my seized engine freed up and mostly disassembled. I discussed all of this in episodes 26 and 27 back in February and March of last year. Really, I somewhat rushed out my first video on this matter, episode 26, without fully thinking things through, and then felt compelled to quickly follow up with some clarifications or further better explanations of things. In May of 2025, I decided to have my rocker assembly rebuilt by Rocker Arms Unlimited in California. I was originally going to do this work myself, and I had collected many of the parts for doing so, but Rocker Arms Unlimited seems to be very well thought of in the Triumph community, and I have more on my plate than I can say grace over, as a former colleague is fond of saying. So I called up Rocker Arms Unlimited and chatted with a gentleman there, and then I boxed up my rocker assembly and sent it away. I did emphasize both over the phone and in an included note that I wanted my original rocker assembly back instead of an exchange unit. This is the rocker assembly prior to being sent off. I cleaned it up a bit, but it was still a little bit crusty. The rocker arm pads had some nail catchers on them, and there was some rocker arm to shaft wear, as one would expect from an old Triumph engine with about 85,000 miles on it. And this is how the assembly appeared after being rebuilt. And yes, it looks brand new. I sent it to Rocker Arms Unlimited around mid-May and got it back in late July. So the whole process from the day I shipped it to the day the rebuilt unit was on my doorstep took about 9 or 10 weeks. A couple of things I'll note. First, I double boxed my assembly and took every precaution in shipping it. And that was definitely overkill on my part, but I can say it was not remotely as well boxed up for the return trip. And indeed, through whatever rough handling it must have received on the return journey, the shaft had actually started to break through the box by the time it arrived. But fortunately, it was fine and looks great. The other thing that I've seen from folks who have used Rocker Arms Unlimited is that even though they say the assembly arrives ready to install, people have found some swarf when they have blown out the assembly's oil passage. That said, clearing the oil passage prior to installation is simply good practice. And I would say to make sure to do that regardless. In these kinds of circumstances, the old trust but verify approach, at the very least, is usually a good one. Thus far, while the rebuilt unit hasn't been tested in operation yet, I'm very happy with my decision to have Rocker Arms Unlimited rebuild my original unit. The last thing for now about the engine is that the head, which I originally stripped down and externally cleaned up in March 2023, was taken this May to a machine shop recommended by some fellow British Car Club members. I got the sense that it is in a bit of a queue, shall we say, and at the time of recording this video, I'm waiting to hear back on it. I guess it's been a little over a month at this point. Assuming that the head is healthy and the rebuild goes well, I'll move pretty quickly on to getting work done on the block and related components. So this first photo is one I've shown on the channel and published previously, and it's of the car when I brought it home in June 2020. I show it here because on the right-hand side of your screen, you can clearly see the damage to the driver's side door. This is something that obviously needed attention. And here is a close-up of the door damage where the door was apparently opened hard into a post or something like that. I will note that the damage to the door probably looks a bit worse here than it actually was because of the angle at which this photo was taken and the fact that the rear wing of the car was not in correct shape either. However, this photo gives a good sense of what I was dealing with. In February 2021, I ordered from the Roadster factory a new door skin. You can see it was a skin that came with the holes for the door handle and lock already punched. I wasn't planning to do the door work right away, but I wanted to have the skin on hand for when the time came to do it. This was a part that I examined and then put away, in this case hung on the wall of the garage, until such time it was needed. It wasn't until July 2025 that I took the door off and removed the door skin through the usual means of carefully grinding the edges and chiseling until the door skin was entirely free from the door shell. I should note here that this is not the door that was original to the car. When my father owned this car in the early 1970s, someone hit the driver's side door in a parking lot, and through insurance, the door was replaced at a local Triumph dealership. I suspect from comparing this door with the original door on the other side of the car that this may have been a Spitfire door that the dealership converted into a GT6 door, but that's speculative. Aggravatingly, the rivet for the door check strap was brazed to the door's top check strap bracket, and it proved difficult to remove. You can see the brazing that remained on the top of the rivet here. It was fixed to the door, and the check strap was rotating around it instead of all the pieces of that joint being free. I'm inclined to think that the dealer who did the door repair back in the early 1970s did it that way for whatever reason, although I can't know that for sure. This door was originally Valencia blue, and someone had punched a couple of big holes in the bottom of the door shell, shown here, presumably to help it drain better. You can see here that the door, like the rest of the car, has minimal rust. Even if the additional holes happen to be a useful modification, they were not factory, and I welded them up so that this door will match the other original door. At this point, I fully sandblasted the shell of the door and made a few little repairs, checked it for straightness, that sort of thing. Then I sprayed the door shell with 2K epoxy primer to get it ready for the skin. I did several little things at this stage. For example, I had removed the plates for the door hinge fasteners, and at this stage I cleaned, painted, and reinstalled them. This is also when I started messing around with door check straps and started to make some discoveries about those that became the subject of episode 32 earlier this year. I checked the fit of the door skin on the shell, and it was about perfect, really. Many complain that the material is a bit skimpy at the bottom of the skin, and it is, but I found it to be adequate for the job. Circumstances almost certainly depend on how many times the door has been reskinned, as I imagine that even with the utmost care, a little bit of the shell flanges get removed each time this operation is done, and it's easy to lose patience and get too aggressive, especially if one is in a hurry. Fortunately, this seems to have been the first reskinning of this door, and I was pretty careful, although definitely not perfect. That said, when I say the skin fit well, I'm discussing the bottom three sides. I don't mean to gloss over the challenges of getting the skin more or less right at the top, at the window opening, which can be rather time-consuming and frustrating as one works with straps and makes adjustments and such. Next, I started getting the door skin ready. I stripped the inside of the door skin and primed it for two reasons. One is that the E-coat had some scratches and issues with it, but mainly I had learned from a couple of sources that I'll note later that the E-coat actually crumbles off when the metal is sharply bent over. So I wanted to ensure that I sprayed the edges of the door skin with something that might better survive when hammering the skin over. I also wanted to ensure a good surface for the sound deadener mats to adhere to. Then there are a couple of things that need to be added to make a complete, correct GT6 door, so I started making those bits. Shown in the marked area here on the left-hand side is the original, and I use that term loosely, bridge or brace or channel, whatever you want to call it, that goes underneath the vent window or quarter light on GT6 doors, and to the right of it is one I made. Here's an image of that particular brace from my good right-hand door. And here's another. Spitfires don't have these, of course, because the Spitfire doesn't have quarter lights. The Spitfire window runs the full length of the door. Unfortunately, the bridge I made ended up being a bit of a problem. It was virtually identical to the original through every means of measurement and comparison, and I went ahead and mounted it to the door shell when it is easiest to weld it on, since it's a bit tight putting a MIG torch down in that channel. However, trying to get the door skin on with that bridge attached to the shell was frustrating. The bridge I had made seemed to want to make that area of the window opening narrow no matter how I bent or messed with it. It almost seemed to defy the laws of physics. Of course, this meant that when I test fitted the vent window, it was a very tight fit through that area, too tight. Out of frustration, I ended up removing this first bridge I made and putting the door skin on where I was happy with a pretty consistent gap all along the window opening. Then, after the door skin was installed, I fabricated a new, slightly larger bridge and put it on after the fact. After the skin is on the shell, there is obviously ample room to reach up into the door and insert the bridge. The limited space for the MIG torch inside the channel made for less than pretty work, but the vent window does not sit on that bridge. It simply acts as a brace, meaning ugly or blobby welds don't really interfere with anything. And actually, the brazing on this particular door was quite blobby when compared with the other, which is a key reason why I think this may have been a modified Spitfire door. Regardless, I got the channel welded in fine on both sides after the fact. However, I've leapt ahead and gotten things out of order here. Let's get back to the proper timeline. To the right of the channels is the little strengthener that goes on the front of the door where the window channel ends and the door skin starts wrapping around the long front corner piece that aligns with the shape of the bonnet. I added that strengthener by spot welding in a pattern that imitated the factory spot welds. Some people might not add this piece to the reproduction door skins, but Triumph thought it necessary, and it's not too hard to work out the reasoning behind it. Next thing I did was drill a hole for my door mirror. I discussed this item in my episode that featured the Wingard door mirror, which was so-called short number 3, posted in November 2025. It occurs to me that the name of the company that produced the mirror is almost certainly pronounced Wingard in its country of origin, but for now at least I will stubbornly stick with my U.S. Southern Wingard. Anyway, I cut the old door skin and used it as a template for locating the door mirror hole, which, among other things, helped me to avoid that area when I was adding the sound deadening sheets inside the door skin. As a replacement door, I wasn't 100% sure that the hole was in the same place as the true original door, but hopefully the dealership who did the work knew what they were doing, or maybe not, but that's where the mirror has been for a long time. While the Wingard door mirrors were standard for U.S. cars in 1969, per the factory parts catalog, I'm still not quite sure about the when and how of their installation. Also, it's worth noting about this image that you can see here that the handle and lock holes in the original door skin and the reproduction skin don't quite line up, with the lock hole especially a little bit lower than on the old door. For sound deadening, I decided to use Eastwood's X-Map, and I've been happy with that decision so far. Then it was time to install the door skin. I got a proper door skinning hammer there in the middle of this image, and then the little trim hammer to its right really came in handy in a few difficult spots as I worked the skin around the door shell. Then I used the Eastwood door skin pliers, being careful to keep the nylon pad flat against that skin to not torque on the pliers and damage the skin. In this image, I have the door skin strapped to the door shell on a part stand, and I've started hammering the skin over slowly but surely while much of the rest of the car looks on in the background. I got the skin fully hammered over and then used the door skin pliers to crimp things down as well as I could. In this image, I've tacked the skin onto the shell, trying to mimic what the factory did to ensure the skin doesn't move or lift. My welds here didn't turn out beautiful, but they will suffice. Next, I had to weld the window channel so that it is solid on both ends so that the skin is firmly attached to the shell and the window channel is properly boxed in per the factory results. This is probably the most challenging part of this job. Here's an image of the front after a good bit of welding and cleaning up. And here's an image of the back of the window channel. It's a bit blurry, unfortunately, but it's what I have. Here's a quick video of the mostly finished door from the inside. There's obviously a fair bit of glare in places from the sun hitting some of the bare metal at the fold of the skin over the door, but it's not too bad. And here's a quick look at the outside of the door. I'm pretty happy with the results, especially given this is my first time with this work. A few of the C-clamps I used to hold the door skin onto the shelf for hammering over did slightly dent the skin, which is frustrating, but not the end of the world. I do, of course, expect there may be some cuts and welds that will come with trying to get acceptable fitment with the body, even though I'm not aiming for perfect gaps or anything like that. I do want to especially acknowledge a few sources I used for this work. There are others, but these are the ones that were most important. One is the Haynes Guide to Purchase and DIY Restoration of the Small Triumph Cars by Lindsay Porter and Peter Williams, which is an older book, but it is very helpful. Another is Ed Hollingsworth's discussion of his door work on his own 1969 GT6 Plus on his excellent GT6 blog on his bullfire.net website. The last are the GT6 door-related videos over on the Red Fox Classics YouTube channel, which were a tremendous help. The creator of that channel seems to have had the exact same trouble I had with the brace beneath the vent window, and I remember thinking how odd it was when I was watching that video, and then I had the exact same trouble, so I guess maybe it's not altogether unusual. Anyway, I did want to offer a hat tip to those particular sources, all of which I examined multiple times and found tremendously helpful.